I want my characters to have their own identity. I want them to have their own motivations, but it just sometimes it feels like I'm playing a board game by myself.
Sometimes people, especially amateur writers, will use side characters to tell the story as opposed to showing the story.
What is like the purpose of the character? Like, are they in that story just to, be the vendor at the shop or whatever?
Hi, I'm Max.
I'm Drew.
And I'm Leisha.
Plot hole.
Said I'd write one chapter, wrote none.
I'm sorry, you do what?
I changed the ending again.
3 writers.
Countless blueprints.
Infinite stories. And now, into the story. I guess the first thing we can talk about is like, what are different types of side characters? Because I feel like you have obviously your typical side characters that we think of generally. So like the main character's best friend. Or so like one of the most infamous ones that I can think of off the top of my head is Samwise. He's an infamous side character. Although
Infamous.
arguably he is giving main character energy. So but I guess my first question for you guys is, how do you feel that your side characters in your own personal works contribute to this telling of your stories?
So right now, I'm actually really struggling with my side characters. I have a lot of them that are gonna have like really big parts in my story, but the problem is, I feel like I'm battling them to like support the story versus have their own identity.
That's an interesting predicament, yeah. Because like, there's definitely different tiers of side characters. There's like the supporting characters who really they're ensemble. They come in, they do a thing, they leave, you never see them again. But I get what you mean though, because like you need these side characters are there to support the story. That's why they're called supporting characters.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the best part of supporting characters, if they're done well, is they have their own identity. Like, for all its flaws and everything, Harry Potter side characters make the story for me. Like, I've always like loved the side characters of those stories, because it's like, who it is. You like see them. Oh, that's Seamus. He blows stuff up. He has his own identity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do they use it at times to support the story? Sure, which is good. But I like that it's like his own identity. It's where he comes from. And like, who it is. And that I think is part of what makes a good side character, is that memorability. And I think part of it's because of what you're saying there.
Yeah. I want my characters to have their own identity. I want them to have their own motivations, but it just sometimes it feels like I'm playing a board game by myself. I'm playing like Monopoly by myself, and I have to like, okay, let me swap over to like this other player on the table who's also me, as the author. But then I have to play that specific turn as though I want that turn to win or something like that. I don't know. That might be a weird analogy.
I'm having flashbacks to when like my brother and sister did not want to play board game with me, and I played it all by myself.
But I feel like an extra challenge, especially when you're put like pitted against yourself,
yeah,
as a writer, is that then you have to go through the mental gymnastics of, do I try to set myself up to win, or do I act as like my own opposition, my own antagonist, if you will? So I definitely can relate to that in a lot of ways. One of the things that I realized is that most of the side characters in my stories eventually become main characters, because I'm writing a 3-book series where it's highlighting different characters. And so then I have to think to myself, how do I, I guess, pull back on certain characters in favor of letting another one shine? That's something that I think I'm going to have to tackle a little bit more and understand a little bit more and be conscientious of it as I'm writing. That's where I'm at. As far as the side characters in my story, there are a couple that I adore. Like, sometimes I love side characters more than I like main characters.
Oh yeah.
And there are a few characters, especially when it comes to the friends of my main characters, that I adore, because those are probably the ones that emulate most of the characteristics of the people that I love in real life. And so, because I mean, mind you, like, I'm the main character of my own story, thankfully. And it's exhausting. I'm tired. And I can only imagine, like, and when I'm putting myself in the shoes of my characters, I can understand. Like, sometimes it's really tough being like at the center of your own world in a lot of ways. So the relief that the people around us and that side characters employ in stories is vital to, I think, just making it where the story not only can continue and progress, but also just be present in the moments that I'm writing about.
So to, I guess, continue this conversation with you guys, when you read other amateur writers' work, like mine, for example, what are some of the what are some of the things that you see that other amateur, like, what are some of the mistakes that you see other amateur writers make when attempting to involve side characters, when attempting to introduce them into the plot? Like, what are some of the
I don't know. You just seemed like you had something to say, but if you have something to say, go for it. Yeah. I don't got anything.
So I think something that a lot of people struggle with or get wrong when they're talking about side characters or trying to keep side characters as a part of it, as this is something that Max and I've talked about a lot. Sometimes people, especially amateur writers, will use side characters to tell the story as opposed to showing the story. I think side characters are a great mechanism for that. And mind you, there's a time and a place for when it's appropriate to tell and when you need to show, I think, the exposition of your story. But I think that that's probably the main pitfall that I see for a lot of writers, especially in the beginning, is your side characters should help you progress the story, but they shouldn't be like how you get all of the context for the story.
Think about too, like, what is like the purpose of the character? Like, are they in that story just to, be the vendor at the shop or whatever? Are they there to do that? So that's why I think I'm a little bit more cautious and careful when I'm reading other people's work, because I want to know, like, if this character is just there to be a set piece versus being an important part of the story. I think that my judgment on that differs a lot. I know in a version of your story, Drew, I don't know if this is still where it was, but at one point your main character was like in a quarry of some kind.
Yeah, in a stone quarry.
Yeah. I remember like reading that and like seeing like a lot of like the other characters that he's interacting with, even ones that he actually talks to for a little while. And I knew that they were there to make the stone quarry a stone quarry and not an empty cave.
Yeah.
Where the character was sitting there alone. Like, he had to have people to interact with, and that to me, it was like, once I understood that, like, I was like, okay, like, I don't have to like necessarily like dig deep into what this character's doing. So I think for amateur writers, that is helpful to know. That a lot of times characters sometimes are just set pieces, like background characters. I was actually, what were we were watching Treasure Planet earlier today, which is great, by the way.
Incredible movie.
Have you ever watched like behind the scenes stuff? Or it's so cool. The director, actually, they had like a little like get together, like I think last year on Zoom with all of the production team, and they talked about like it took him like 15 years to make the movie from like start to finish. He had this idea, and it was so cool. But anyway, I was noticing that when they're going through the spaceport, when the like at the end of the movie, like he meets up with his mom in the spaceport, every character in the background is doing something. You can see like someone's like shining shoes in the background, someone's like passing out like stuff. There's the two guys that are like singing and they're drunk and everything. Every single thing was like a set piece. So like you could look around, and so like in a story setting, you could look around. Let's say we show with the quarry example, like you can talk about like this person over here is, chiseling away. This person over here is nursing his thumb because he just hit it real hard, or you can hear like the voice of the quarry master. I don't know what to call.
I think the role that I gave him was he was like a type of
taskmaster,
like a taskmaster or
Yeah.
something. He was just like, get back to work.
Yeah.
And he's got like a whip or a
But
rod
that
or
was
something.
cool. So like
yeah.
that gave him a little bit more than just background.
Mhm.
He actually had those lines and everything, so it like pushed the story along in an important way too.
This actually brings like another really interesting question to mind. Obviously, when you're talking about a movie, you can look in the background and see the things, but obviously when it comes to writing a story, you have to explain it. You don't have a visual aid of any kind, other than the words that you use. So have there been situations where, I mean, obviously the Stone Quarry scene is probably a great example, but other situations in your stories where you've had to explain kind of what's going on in the scene a little bit more so that you can kind of flesh out like what the setting is or where they're at this point in time, and at what point is it too much?
Okay. Since Max shouted me out, I'm gonna shout him out. There was a story that you were working on earlier this year. It was the one that was gonna be like the steampunk pirate themed one or whatever.
Yeah, wow, I've gone through a lot this year.
And there was a scene that you wrote in that story that you sent to us to kind of give some feedback on, and it's steampunk plus pirates, and so steampunk by design kind of has a lot going on. There's often dials and whistles and all kinds of like machines like whirring and making all kinds of sounds, and it's really busy. But I think one of the greatest examples of immersing yourself in the scene, like, or describing, like setting a scene that is busy but not overdoing it, was your first description of the boat. When you described the stack on how like the back of the boat has like a bunch of different floors and it's like really tall. And that description was like, I don't know, it was like 2 paragraphs. It was like not long at all. But immediately I knew exactly what it looked like and what was going on. Like a picture came up into my mind and I was like, I feel like that's just, you take a couple paragraphs, especially if it's really important to the setting. And in this case, you're setting the setting, like the boat itself. You need to know what the boat looks like. You're going to be on the boat for the majority of the story. But those 2 paragraphs, I was just like, oh yeah, I know what this boat looks like. And it was perfect. I loved it.
Cool. I take compliments well, as you can see. But it's so funny because I loved like talking about that and then like inserting like people throughout there's a couple versions of that. There was one version where I did like a prologue-ish kind of thing where he was on a different boat. It wasn't as chaotic as the one with the stack was. But it was like, it was nighttime, so he was kind of alone, but I described there was a couple people that were still awake. And then I got to kind of like really get into depth with them. And the fun thing about pirates is that you can have very colorful characters, like no matter where you are in the story.
Yeah.
So that was super fun to do. Man, now I want to go back and look at that story again. My
bad.
No. Hey, you know what? My world that I'm currently building right now kind of has a little bit of steampunk in there. Maybe it fits into this world now. Who knows? I don't know. We'll see.
I actually, if you guys are okay with it, I wanted to give an example from my D&D short story that I wrote last week.
Oh yeah, I actually never. I didn't read it because.
Well, yeah, I didn't send it to you, but I'll send it to you after the campaign.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I didn't read it.
Well, I mean, look, it's a short story. I was trying to just like briefly do a scene and stuff, and there was a background character. Basically, the setting was like my character was like a priest or like an acolyte at some religious like monastery or something, and he gets sent by his mentor to go and retrieve some documents for like the study that he's doing. And so he goes down to the library because his mentor's study is in like one of the upper floors, and I wanted to kind of get your guys's I guess reaction to like
Live
this
reaction?
live reaction to this.
Ooh.
And listen, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination like a good writer, but I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts were on like briefly setting the scene on a side character that is in the story for half a second, but it adds to the to like the background to the scene a little bit. Let me.
Okay.
You can keep talking. Let's see if I can find it
You
real
haven't
quick.
even pulled
I
it
can't
out.
find it.
While Drew's looking, I was thinking a little bit about situations where I have to create like a scene and want to show people what the setting is in those particular moments. And the one that actually came to mind was the first prologue that I wrote for the Regency book with the basement, and like having to create that scene and like trying to describe, it's the summertime, and so like the basement is really musty, and there's like setting up the scene in that way where I'm preparing a scene for unease. Like there's nothing nice about this scene where you're feeling uneasy the further into the story that you get. But I create a lot of scenes like that, but there's also situations where like I know like a scene that I have to come up with soon is a diner scene. So like being able to describe what does the diner look like. One of my characters is a mechanic, and so I'm describing what is it like to be in a shop? What are the things that you're hearing? What does it smell like? What are the people in the background doing? What are the other mechanics doing? And also having to use a lot of technical knowledge on things like that. So I feel like when it comes to those things, I like that I don't have to introduce like novel ideas when it comes to what I'm trying to represent. But at the same time, it's like I have to be very aware and observant of when I find myself in those situations and how would I describe it as a writer.
I found it.
Yeah, you ready? Go
Yeah.
for it.
Okay. By lamplight, the keeper of the sacred library worked around the clock, rewriting some of the more ancient texts so as to not lose them to time. Whether or not he knew Vorn was in the room was impossible to tell, as he didn't so much as look up from his writing. The poor man was almost as old as some of the books in the room. His writing hand was twisted and gnarled from a lifetime of being curled around a quill.
Yes. I like how quickly like this episode has changed from just side characters and support characters to like the setting and backgrounds and how like character drives that sometimes too. It's not just talking about what something looks like, but it's like how is it populated. And like the imagery of like a old man with his hand so twisted up from writing, it's just wrapped around
It's
the
just
quill.
permanently like stuck in that. Yeah.
Like I'm sure like you take out the quill, his hand's still like that, like in a little claw shape. Like that is so vivid and awesome. So and that's it for that character?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh.
That's all he gets. Yeah.
Does Vorn like kill him? I don't know.
No.
It was very ominous. You're like, he didn't know Vorn was in the room, and I was like, oh, what's gonna happen?
It was more of just like Vorn walks into this restricted part of the library, and that librarian specifically, it's just to show that like someone is there and it keeps takes care of the books in that section of the library, and he's really old. He's very immersed in his work, which then allows Vorn to slip into the next part of the scene unnoticed.
That's really cool. Because like I can think of like if we're going back to Harry Potter, like we talk about like restricted section library, like you think about like Mr. Filch like walking through the library and everything, ominously as Harry's like hiding kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's completely different like feeling if you're in there. Like that feels still like a cozy like fantasy library. And then he needs to keep moving on kind of thing. Like it's just a moment. Oh, someone's here. He's so old, he doesn't even
He's
know I'm
not paying
here.
attention to me.
He's not
I'm
even
out.
here. So
Yeah.
There's a very different feeling of somebody's actually looking for you or whatever
Mhm.
too. So that's cool. That's
yeah,
really cool.
I just really like the because we've been talking about side characters as a part of setting almost
Mhm.
so far in this episode, and it's been kind of nice to like talk about like you said, to bring up the merchant that that your character goes and buys a sandwich from at the port that they just got to, like how that character acts is actually really important to a reader's ability to be immersed in the story.
Yes, yeah.
So I was just thinking to myself, like, I think the interactions that our characters have with side characters help us see what the character's like, because you had right on the money where depending on how a side character interacts with the character, you're going to see a very specific side of that character. So for example, if I think about this kind of regularly, but imagine like one of your characters got cut off in traffic. How would they react? Like, what would their response be? And I think about, regardless of what situation, depending on the character, what their background is, how, like, what their mentality is at that point in time, what they're going through, they're going to have a completely different reaction from, just kind of depending on what's going on in the context. But I think that that's why side characters are so important, and why we do consider them as part of the setting is because these are the components of the story that your character's interacting with. So it's so important to utilize those side characters as, I'm not just moving the story along, I'm telling you exactly where this character is at this point in time.
Now I'm realizing that when Leisha's done talking, she just hands it to me. And I'm like hogging it until she force pulls it towards her. I was actually going to bring up one of your side characters that I love. It is, I can't remember. It's the museum curator's best friend. Archer, yes. It's like the gay best friend, right? It's like, yeah, it is. He's one of the funniest characters I've ever read. And she just has like one major scene with him that I've read, at least.
Wait, is it the one that I read?
Yes.
Oh,
You
okay.
remember this character? But like, he's
Yeah.
like, it's just the way that he banters, like, instantly made him likable. And like, I was laughing. Like, it was like a genuinely like really entertaining scene. And I love characters. I know there is a trope of like the side character and like especially the best friend character being the comedic relief, but like that's good sometimes. I think you shouldn't do it all the time. You really shouldn't. But like in the right context, it just brings a lot of like life to a character. Because then if your character is friends with that character, especially if your character is like dry or like the opposite of like funny, it's nice to breathe that life into them. Again, it's like that's like the purpose of that side character. If you like looking at a side character as their own person, like they can be fleshed out and be fine. But at the end of the day, like what do they bring to the story? That's what we want to see. And like, how did they bring the story to life?
It's funny that you brought up Archer, because that was actually who I was thinking about
Yeah.
as we've been having this conversation. Archer is my favorite side character that I've gotten to write. And I think a big part of it is I have so many people in my life who just their general flamboyance, regardless of what their sexual orientation is, has been, it's such a pinnacle point of why I love them as much as I do. I think that when we're able to be unapologetically and authentically ourselves, that's what like where I feel my best. And so I love when people are like do that every single day from the moment that they wake up, because I think all of us can relate to putting on a mask. And I think a lot of main characters, you see more of the like inner turmoil, but with side characters, just see them for what they are in that moment. And I think that for me, Archer is just who he is regardless of what's going on. Like I just picture throughout the entirety of the time that they've known each other, Archer has stayed exactly the same. He's been consistent, and that I think is why Peter, who's the character that he's best friends with, like that's his anchor. That's consistently the person that he looks to of like, I know I can be myself 100% with this person. I don't have to put on a mask. I don't have to, play a part. This is just an opportunity for me to focus on who I am. Yeah, so Archer's definitely one of my favorite characters for sure.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed reading that scene that you sent over to the group. I was like, wait, that's
it's
good.
been a while since you sent that. It was a good one though.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually something you said kind of pops in my mind too about like how Archer has stayed the same for a long time. But the main character, Peter, he's got a lot he's going on in his life. That can also be a good balancing act. I think it's important for side characters to have their own mini arcs too. But if they have too big of arcs, it can kind of take away sometimes. That's why I think of like Lord of the Rings. Frodo is the main character, but like so is Aragorn too. And like because it's two stories that they're telling side by side. I would not consider Aragorn a side character because if he was a side character, his arches would be very small. Do you know when he kicked that helmet, he broke his toe?
Dude.
Oh my god!
I actually got to do that to my wife because she's never seen Lord of the Rings before.
No way!
And I got to do it.
Yes!
I was so excited.
It's like one of those things where it's like, I hate doing this, but it has to be done.
Yeah, no, it definitely has to be done. And the best part about it was my wife, she was just like, oh my gosh, really? That's so cool.
You're like, yes!
Holy
yes!
crap, I got to do it.
But I think sometimes it's good, though, if you have a side character that is secure in who they are. Like, I guess if we're going to keep on with Lord of the Rings, like, technically, Legolas does not change, period. Like, he is loyal before, he's loyal during, he's loyal at, he's just saying. But he's an important part because he grounds Aragorn. Like, Aragorn turns to him for a quick moment quite often, and Legolas just reassures him. That's it. That's all he does. Legolas actually does nothing in Lord of the Rings, by the way. I don't know about the book. I've started reading Lord of the Rings, but I've not gotten very far. But he does very little, other than just shooting a bow and arrow a lot. But he's a beloved character, probably because he helps buoy up the other characters. So sometimes it's good. Just have someone who can contrast your main character, who is going to have an arc, which is like hopefully a roller coaster, or has at least been a roller coaster up to this point. We're getting somewhere.
I feel like over the course of the last, I don't know, like it feels like everybody got really stingy about stories and characters over the pandemic. Like everyone just had a lot of time to read and watch movies and stuff. I just feel like everybody's tastes and I don't know, I feel like Max is totally about to destroy my opinion right now. Yeah. But I don't know. I just feel like everybody expects a lot from side characters now.
I have a reason for this.
Okay.
I'm trying to give your theory some like concrete evidence.
I'm down for this.
Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Do you know how many side characters are in Game of Thrones?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. In the show, there's a lot. In the books, there are literally hundreds of named characters. Hundreds. And like 50 of them are named John. Because George R. R. Martin's whole thing is that he's like, well, I mean, we all have names that are like, other people are named Drew, other people are named Max. No one else is named Glacia, but
I mean,
thanks, Mom. But no, I like actually like believe that that's because Game of Thrones has so many side characters and they all have a story. Like they all came from somewhere and they all die tragic deaths and brutal ways and everything. And like there's so many side characters. There's so many villains that come up and go away. There's people you forgot about that came back. That and One Piece. Those are the two.
I was literally just about to bring
I'd
up
say
One Piece.
One Piece is like, speaking of hundreds of named characters, like he does. The writer of One Piece, Oda, he does this crazy thing where like a character won't be mentioned for literally, like he basically calls the mangas their chapters. They're on chapter like 1100 or something right now.
Yeah.
He has characters he's not mentioned for literally since like chapter like 10, and he'll bring up again, and you're like, oh my gosh, what? This person's like still. And then you got people that like just come back and over again. I truly think that like Game of Thrones, One Piece, like those giant kind of like epics are like why side characters are so scrutinized now. No, characters are scrutinized now because they've been given such an abundance in, to credit George R. R. Martin and Oda, like very colorful, very rememberable characters. So
I think a big part of it is because, especially during COVID and the amount of isolation that everyone felt at that point in time, regardless of what we had going on, I think a big component of it when it comes to the scrutiny that's been kind of around characters in general is, I think it was the first time that we were ever confronted with the fact of like, oh wow, like in actuality, we may be like the main point of view when it comes to our own lives, but we also realize how much we overlap into other people. And this was during a time where that wasn't happening. Like we weren't as involved in other people's lives as we had been before. And so when our escape at that point in time was social media and movies, books, games, we then found ourselves, I think, thinking a little bit more critically about them. But I think that was a very, very important time because, mind you, out of that isolation, it finally gave some people the courage to actually start their, like, whether it was their writing journey or just like their creative journey in general, it gave them an opportunity to finally do that. And in order to do it well and to learn from it, you do have to think critically about what, like, whatever it is that you're going over. So I think on one hand, it was super important, and I think that's why we see that now. On the other hand, I think that the inability to see past your own perspective, especially when it comes to characters, has like driven consumers of like writing apart, where we're now in a position where like we could be talking about the same character, but because we have completely different perspectives on that character, instead of using it as an opportunity to connect, a lot of people use it to drive the other person away.
I realize I haven't actually talked about any of my side characters at all. You guys got. I know, and I just didn't even answer it. I talked about something else entirely.
Well, you just talked about the point that I brought up at the end of my
yeah.
my
And then
statement,
and then I passed on the mic, and I was like,
You should talk about the old man.
Drew is obsessed with this old man. Does he even have a name? I don't think I named him.
You didn't name him, no.
No, because the whole point of that chapter was that he was trying to get Ezric's name too, and Ezric was like, "Nah, you haven't earned that right yet." And then at the end of the chapter, he's like, "By the way, this is my name."
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not gonna talk about the old man just to spite you. No, I actually wanted to bring up something a little bit closer. We've been talking a lot about like these characters on the side who are there to kind of like either support or paint a picture, fill a background. My main character is going to have like a Watson like sidekick, like his like partner in not crime because he's a detective, but maybe crime. He's a private investigator. I don't know. But I'm really excited to like write her, and I have written a chapter with her, like introduction and everything, and I liked like their dynamic right away, and it was very like he was like snippy and she just wouldn't take it kind of thing, like versus everyone else who was like just confused by him or like will you just shut up kind of thing. Like she's like, she like meets him there. What are you laughing about? I feel like that she's laughing about. Are you laughing about this? Like, what are you laughing about? No, I gotta know.
I've just been so conscientious of using filler words. Just listen to you use the word like 25 times. I couldn't keep a straight face. I really tried.
I love you guys dearly, but after editing 11 episodes,
No.
because like I have been very conscientious of it from the beginning. Like after the first episode, I realized I need to chill out with my filler words. And I never worked up the courage to tell you guys.
So instead, you're gonna have it live so that we can have it for all time.
Well, so now the problem is now that we're on video, I can't cut them out. Most of I when we were doing audio only,
it was easy to cut it out.
I genuinely, it'd probably be close to triple digit cuts from cutting out likes, us. From all three of us, by the way. Even with me trying to be conscientious of it, there was a couple of moments where I would just talk and I would sit there and listen to it back and think to myself, what is wrong with me?
I'm sorry.
I was on a roll too.
But to be honest, you wouldn't have thought that. How many times you used that word?
It's okay. We'll just turn that segment into a reel with a like counter on it.
What's really funny is that we've been working on the mic quality too. So
Yeah.
everything you just told me without your mic, no one's gonna hear either. So now I just said now I'm gonna like
You can't think about it too much.
So basically the dynamic of these characters is just this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just writing about my marriage, but with platonic people. So I'm very excited about that, though. I'm excited to keep going with them and have them interact more and do wild things. It's gonna be fun.
So, can we talk about side character antagonists for a second?
Are you referring to side characters you hate, side characters that are like mini bosses, or kind of thing? I don't know how to describe them, but
So there's two parts of this. Because I genuinely feel as though most antagonists are actually in a way a main character to the story.
yeah, they are. Yeah, absolutely. I call them part of the main cast. Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to kind of maybe go back a little bit to the side characters as setting when we're talking about when your character is fighting a bunch of people on the battlefield and they slay 30 nameless people in the name of like it's a battle scene. I don't know. I feel like too often I will read it's just like and then Ezra cut off this other guy's head and then stabbed this other guy through the chest, and like they all just go down without like making a sound or making a face or anything like that. And so it's like when you're in those scenes and you're fighting an antagonistic force or group or something like that, and you're using those characters to kind of set the scene, they're the bad guys, if you will. Do we feel like those characters also need a little bit more, I don't know what else to call it other than screen time?
I think that's a great question, because the first example that kind of came to mind to bring Harry Potter back up is the Dursleys. They're not the main villain by any means, but they are an antagonist for sure, especially when it comes to Harry specifically. But there's also other quote unquote villains that show up throughout the story. I think Gilderoy Lockhart is by far an antagonist, even though he's stupid at the end of the day, and that's really like his biggest crime. He's not great. So that was the first example, and I think that that's a good example of giving them adequate screen time, if you will, where I feel like their stories are fleshed out just enough where that's really well told. That's how the story should go. But to try to think of like maybe an antagonist that doesn't get enough screen time or doesn't like the background. Actually, we were talking about this morning. We were talking about Titan from Megamind. Even though Titan gets plenty of quote unquote screen time, like he ultimately becomes the main villain. We don't actually know all that much about his background. He's just a nice guy.
That's a perfect example.
He's just a nice guy. Had a whole conversation about this. We could literally go on another tangent about this discussion that we had today about, especially in the context of like the way that society has been built around men, but it doesn't serve all men. It serves men who only look to themselves to fill their own needs. Whereas, I mean, you and Max, for example, are very much family men and are very much like focused on what's going to be the best thing for your families. Mind you, society has not been built to help men with that focus. So anyway, but all that to say, Titan, we have no idea what his background is. We literally have nothing except he just is looking to fulfill his own need. And when it comes to trying to win like Roxanne over, he just does what he thinks he needs to in order to get the girl. So
Welcome to our therapy podcast where we talk about the needs of people. No, and I was thinking to go off of to your example of like just nameless like henchmen too, like of just there's certain like times where it's okay to have the nameless henchmen. Like I think about like, do you guys ever play like the Lego Batman games growing up or anything? Like those nameless henchmen, I was like so happy like that they were, Batman in general, like the nameless henchmen are kind of like a staple of the story because it's like, where did they come from? Where did they go? Where did they come from? Cotton Eye Joe. But I think a good example of like a well-used nameless henchman is like the orcs from like Lord of the Rings or like the Uruk-hai. Like they have a presence and they like have their own little lines. They're complaining about maggoty bread, and they're like wanting to. They have like actual. I saw this clip the other day of someone pointed out like there's a scene I think in the extended edition of Two Towers where they basically like Saruman's walking with an orc and the orc is like bringing up, we don't have enough like weapons for them. What are we gonna do with that? Oh, well, just make more. Well, we don't have enough fuel and everything. And someone's like, my favorite character is Union Rep Orc. Like, but like those like little things build a world, build a scene. It helps pull a character from the background just a little bit forward so that it's not just a set. Not just a set piece. And I think from bigger antagonists like Hal, Lockhart, like all those people, and background characters like the orcs, or kind of like you can bring them forward a little bit to. I think the spotlight is not the correct purpose.
It feels like coloring them in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It's cell shading. That's all it is. It turns it from a colored pencil drawing to, it pops out a little bit. Like it just gives a little bit of depth. Depth. That's what I was going for. Yeah.
So we'll go into our last little segment here before we do our weekly word count, which I'm not excited for.
I'm not either.
But when Leisha brought this up at the beginning of our discussion today, eventually most of her side characters are going to become main characters in future stories or in just a future part of this story. How do you get to that point where you love a side character enough to want to give them the spotlight. What kind of, I guess, process do you go through when you're, I don't know what else they call it, making your character sheet? That you're like, you know what? I actually think a story from this character's perspective would be good. Would continue to add to the universe or to the story, if you
I
will.
have one thing to add for this, and then I'll get it to you. I think one aspect of it is like how close the main character is to them, and like how much of a backstory you've already given them, or how little the backstory too. Like if people are curious, or if you're just curious about their backstory, they have an interesting backstory. But like the thing that came to mind was like, I have my last D&D character for our 2-year campaign that Leisha and I were in. He had he was a wildfire druid, and he bonded with the wildfire spirit. And I wanted to give the spirit like a personality and everything. And at one point, my character had died. He ended up being brought back, but it was a questionable, like I wasn't sure it was going to happen. And so I started thinking, if it doesn't I think it was like between sessions, we didn't know if he was going to come back. But if he didn't come back, I started thinking about like, I would like to play his spirit, his wildfire spirit, like see if that like, and that to me is like kind of similar to that, where it's like, this is a side character, but has become such an intrinsic part of his life that I would be okay playing that character too. Explore that too. So I think it's an exploration thing of like, how interesting is this? Can it go further?
I think I agree with Max 100% in that, where ultimately when it comes to expanding on a side character, curiosity and mystery has a lot to do with leading you in that direction. I think the other thing is that we also live in a world where we've touched on fan fiction before. A lot of people like continuity. And I think for continuity's sake, sometimes like being able to look at previous main characters in someone else's story provides a little bit of continuity. So like one of the things that I'm hoping to achieve with this book or with this series is that you still get to see the other characters. You get to see that what their lives look like after the fact, after they've told their side of the story. They get the happy ending, which I think we all love to a point. I'm definitely a big lover in just continuity and being able to see where are they now and different things like that. That's my favorite. Like anytime we watch a based on a true story movie, I wait for the end for where they have just the cards where it's telling you where they are today. That's my favorite part of the whole movie.
Do you Remember the Titans?
Yes. Remember the Titans, Unbroken, like any story where I can get that end title card that tells me where they are. I'm like, that's what I needed.
I don't like it when real life is that like they're in a terrible place in their life, though. That makes me sad.
That is really sad. But I mean, Max is very much in the party of he's usually pretty happy with where the story ends. He is definitely, I think, embraces that catharsis a little bit more than I do. I do not handle it very well. I'm constantly picturing where are they today. So I think that has a lot to do with it as well. We also live in a world where people like that, and so I mean, mind you, it's also a money grab scheme at this point for some things, where there's a purpose behind it, like a larger purpose behind it, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily not okay or that it doesn't have its own value. So
I think for me, I guess to answer my own question, I just really enjoy the exploration of my villains' stories, actually. Understanding and being able to explore the why. How did we get here? What series of events and decisions led us to this point? It's a really fun, I guess, thought experiment for me that I want to expand on with future books. I want to have just, I don't know, little just one-off books where I get to talk about my villains. I don't know, that sounds really fun and interesting to me. But we're running out of time here a little bit, so it's time to start the dreaded section. I'll just go first. I wrote 0 words this week. It was so bad. I Listen, I had the most psycho work week. It was also the first full week of college classes where like I had homework and stuff. So I have a full-time job and I'm going back to school full-time with homework. And this week was my first week at attempting to like do all of that at the same time. I think I've got the schedule down now though. I can see the patterns. I'll have to see if I can fit writing into that.
It's like you've seen the Lego movie
Yeah.
where like he sees like I see everything. He sees all like the parts and everything everywhere. He knows how to build things. Like that's like Drew now. He's like I see the path.
Yeah,
I
maybe
can
I'm
write
going a
in
little
that
crazy.
1 5-minute slot. And then you sit down to write and you're like, oh, I'm running out of time. Oh well. So I didn't get an exact word count. It's like less than 300 words.
Okay.
So I'm not much better than you this week. So I have this vision for what is happening, and for some reason I sit down and write it. I'm like, I can't write this, and I just close the computer. I don't know why.
That's too real.
I've been talking with people about how I'm writing this next part of the scene, and I can't do it. I don't know why. I don't know why. I just gotta do it.
So, after a couple weeks of writing 2,000 words, I did not write 2,000 words this week. I wrote, "You're gonna love this." Can you guess?
Well,
I can't tell if
I don't
you're-
I don't want to be optimistic. My optimistic sense is like 200 words, but 757 words? No way.
757 words.
No way.
Yeah.
Why is this number significant?
It's my lucky number. When I made my Lego.com account, when I was like 10.
We're getting Mac's backstory.
This is
right
Mac's
now.
lore, okay? I am not I'm a side character in her story. I need my own lore, okay? I really wanted to go by I think it's pronounced Rio, but I called it Ryo. But it was basically a character in one of the Lego sets that I really liked. He had purple spiky hair. It was very cool. I really wanted to be called by that. But the name was taken. And so they randomly generated me 3 numbers, and it was 757. And so I was Ryo757 on Lego.com.
That's legendary.
And that's
Okay.
why it's my favorite number. It's my lucky number.
That's so good.
So the fact that you wrote that specifically is amazing.
I thought for sure Leisha was setting us up for I've been having multiple weeks of 2,000 words. This week I did not write 2,000 words. I wrote 3,000 words.
See, I was hoping it was the opposite direction, and she wrote less than 300 words, which would mean I
we
won.
can't be preying on each other's downfall here. We gotta be.
That's true. That's true.
Uh,
Anyway, well, that was a good episode.
Yeah.
It went a little longer than we were anticipating, but I think it was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get back into the story.